Hello everyone, it's Theme Park Avenue, I'm Eric. For those who don't know, Busch Gardens Tampa is my home park. I had the pleasure of visiting a few times in 2022, and the park was pretty different this year from the past. So this park review, I will be going over certain aspects of the park, and determining whether or not this was the best year in the park's history from what I've experienced, and whether or not it might be the best park in America right now. So let's start by talking about what everyone wants to know about Busch Gardens Tampa, the roller coasters. Unlike most parks in Florida, Busch Gardens Tampa is primarily focused on the thrilling roller coasters in its ride collection, as opposed to the highly themed experiences of Disney and Universal. Those parks have some thrilling rides, but Busch Gardens Tampa has quite a collection. And the newest one, of course, is Iron Gwazi. Opening in March 2022, February for those who could access it early, Iron Gwazi has widely been considered the best roller coaster in the world by many people. And personally, I would agree. I've been on a good amount of roller coasters, and while there are a lot of phenomenal ones out there and it's pretty close competition, Iron Gwazi, I do think, is the best #1 roller coaster to have in a park, period. It is the absolute headliner attraction. Everything about it, if you enjoy intense adrenaline rush rides, it's definitely going to be your cup of tea. The first drop, the moments where you're flying out of your seat with the airtime, the crazy inversions, the pacing, it's a wonderful experience and definitely favorite ride in the park. And this ride alone probably makes the park better than the majority of amusement and theme parks in America. But there's a lot more to it besides that. Montu is my second favorite here, and it's among the best B&M inverts out there. The rides where you're dangling below the track, they can be fun, but Montu is on another level for most. It is shockingly intense, and fortunately, you'll be provided with some unique sensations. Primarily, some moments that feel like airtime like on Iron Gwazi, something you don't expect on an inverted coaster. And of course the Batwing is crazy, and the way you go in and out of troughs with the terrain was a really clever usage. The ride has a wonderful appearance, though I will admit the old color scheme was better. And overall, Montu's a great second place for the park. Then there's Sheikra, the B&M dive coaster. When you're held up there for a few seconds, everyone around you screaming, maybe even you screaming yourself depending on who you are, that's always a thrilling experience. And the drop itself is excellent. And following that, you have a few really fun elements. I love the water splash. I love the sorta inversion, sorta not. I still don't really know what to classify it as. And the second drop is also great. You do slow down a bit for it, I will admit that. But other than that, Sheikra, while not the longest and most intense, is a very fun experience, and one I think is a bit underrated. Kumba is also a fantastic ride. The biggest issue is that sometimes the ride can be a bit painful, because it's a pretty old ride compared to the others, so bumpiness sometimes happens. But it's worth it to experience the intense inversions. The G-forces pulled here feel like some of the strongest in the park. And typically for me, the first half is the most enjoyable, and the second half it loses a little bit of that enjoyability, but many consider this the second best or even best ride in the park. Some don't love it, but I still think it makes for a fantastic #4. Following that, you have Cheetah Hunt, which admittedly is not the most thrilling of launch coasters. It's very long and kind of meandering, so a bit more family-oriented, but the experience is special. There are a few roller coasters built like that go in such a long path out and back, going up, inverting over a sky ride and all of that, and it has a beautiful presentation. The highlights for me are some of the airtime moments with the really quirky Windcatcher Tower, which is what that one looking hill is known as. It's really funny, honestly, but I think it is a beautiful thing to look at and fun to ride. Cheetah Hunt, while definitely a bit overhyped for me because it's the most popular ride in the park probably, I think it makes for a fantastic #5. So this top 5 is strong. Then you have Cobra's Curse, a great spinning coaster. It has some pretty good theming too. Scorpion as a classic Schwarzkopf looping coaster, which pulls surprising intensity and is very fun. And then you have Serpent, a wild mouse. And it's there, but I'm not really riding it ever again. And then Eric Grover is a fun kiddie ride. Now, one roller coaster I've been saving for the end is Tigris. This is definitely the most disappointing of rides in the park. This model is known as a Premier Ride Skyrocket 2. The way you go forward and backward makes it one that the average person going to the park would be like, wow, that's crazy. I don't think the gimmick is quite as interesting as that, but the bigger issue is how tight the cars are, and this is an issue for many people, and it's a pretty painful experience. While it does pack some intensity, and it's at least forgivingly short in terms of how much it saves time by not having you just sit in that tight car for 3 minutes if it were Cheetah Hunt's cars, for example, you know? If this were on Cheetah Hunt could be like the worst launch coaster ever. Tigris is just kind of a ride for me, and I highly prefer Superman Ultimate Flight at Six Flags Discovery Kingdom, which is another Skyrocket 2 that I think personally is an awesome ride. So it's weird how restraints can make that big a difference. So outside of roller coasters, you have Falcon's Fury, the best drop tower I've ever been on, with tilting seats, a wonderful view, and of course, an insane drop. Now beyond that, there's not a whole lot of thrill rides. Fortunately, that will be improved when Serengeti Flyer opens next year. That will be a scream and swing, similar to Skyhawk at Cedar Point, or the giant barn swing at Silver Dollar City. So I think it's going to be a wonderful addition, and I like the location and the colors they chose. But there are other great rides, such as the train ride and the sky ride. Both of these provide views of the Serengeti areas of the park, with so many animal sightings from elephants to giraffes. The list goes on. And if you enjoy animals, I think those are two of the best ways to see them. So there's not a ton of rides besides the roller coasters and the ones I just named. There's really nothing else of note. But I think they will improve that in the future. As it stands though, that's the park's one kind of major shortcoming. Let's talk animals. So seeing African animals in an amusement park is pretty special. You have elephants, lions, tigers, giraffes, so much more. They fit really well into the park. They're mixed in a way that kind of combines a zoo and park feel. There are other parks where the zoo's kind of sectioned off, but this one really mixes it in well, and I think that makes for a really fun experience, and adds quite a bit. Now on a kind of similar note, let's talk about the overall park appearance. This is a beautiful theme park. It has some wonderfully themed areas such as Pantopia, being sort of an African marketplace area, and I think every building has such a vibrant and wonderful feel. Egypt, while a bit more minimalistic, looks great, and the roller coasters are shockingly well incorporated. And on that note, every roller coaster is beautiful, except Serpent. But I love the colors of them all, and most of them really make sense in the areas they're put in, with Sheikra just towering over everything where it is, Cheetah Hunt going through the whole park, Kumba kind of in the back, and then Montu in an area with the terrain being used as you go through depressions in the ground and troughs. And then of course Cobra's Curse has the giant Snake King statue. That's a huge plus. And Iron Gwazi being the centerpiece of the park and being the tallest roller coaster in the park makes it an absolutely beautiful and magnificent figure to be looking at as you walk around. The same can be said for Falcon's Fury, which is in the true center of the park if you really consider the whole Serengeti thing. And one other important thing is the atmosphere that does fit with the appearance, and it's the fact that Busch Gardens does not feel like a huge, major corporately owned park the way Disney does. And I think that's a good thing. The more regional park atmosphere, which I think is aided by the fact that the park is surrounded by a small kind of commercial area with a few stores like a Wendy's and whatever, it's not really sectioned off like Disney or Universal is, and it feels like a fun family-owned experience more than those, so you don't feel like you're in a corporate cash grab the way you would if you were a cynic like me going to Walt Disney World. So that kind of benefits the way the park is. And then there's walking trails that allow you to truly enjoy the appearance, such as Mayambi Reserve, where you can see gorillas and chimpanzees, and the Edge of Africa area, with everything from hippos to hyenas to lions. Now in terms of walking, as I was mentioning, the layout is an important part of the park for me. It's how easy it is to find your way around without getting lost, unless it's a kind of park like SeaWorld City where getting lost is not really a bad thing, and you can just enjoy the scenery. And to an extent that works here, but it's not a big deal because it's kind of hard to get lost here. The way the rides are, most of them are pretty easy to find, with the only flaws in the layout for me being the fact that it seems Montu and Kumba are kind of in their own separate areas where you have to walk and backtrack a little bit, but it's really not major. Other than that, I think it's easy to find your way around, and the entrances to rides are not difficult to find, and I absolutely love walking around here. Granted, I might not be the best person to judge the layout because it's been a long time since my first visit, and the first visit's really where you can tell if a layout is easy to get around or not. But after getting used to it, even maybe after not getting used to it, I feel like there are just some simple paths you can take that will get you on everything efficiently. So it's definitely a pretty fun park to get around, and one where the paths are very convenient, and you can get from area to area quickly despite the park's very large size. Now, one very important thing we must talk about, the food. Food is not significant at pretty much any other park. I don't go to theme parks for food, but at Busch Gardens Tampa, that's an exception. I get food pretty much every time, primarily for the unbeatable Twisted Tail pretzels. There's not a single theme park food for me that is quite as tasty as these. I've had some other good theme park foods. I've had cinnamon bread at Silver Dollar City. For those who know Dollywood, it's the same as that. I've had butter beer at Islands of Adventure. I've had all that kind of good stuff, but nothing compares to Twisted Tail pretzels. And then, of course, Zambia's Smokehouse has really strong barbecue. And I think Busch Gardens Tampa has some of the best food of any theme park overall. Now, there's one other important thing to talk about: operations. How lines are kept moving and how rides are kept operating. So, in terms of food lines, they move efficiently. I don't think even on crowded days you have to wait that long to get food. A very nice change from the majority of other parks in the nation, honestly. Cedar Fair and Six Flags parks mightily struggle with this typically, so it's a nice change of pace. And then, the other parts are a weak point, unfortunately. If you're trying to get on rides, the operations are not really the best. Iron Gwazi is the standout for less than stellar operations. I'm sure there are reasons behind it and all, but while I typically would say a 2-minute dispatch, maybe 3, is fairly acceptable for a ride, I consistently waited 5 minutes for a car to leave the station, starting from when the gates opened for you to get on to when it left. And that's not really great, because if it takes 5 minutes to cycle a train with 16 people, you're not going to get a whole lot of people out every hour, and the capacity is hindered as a result. And that's how long lines really form in parks. Fortunately, the B&Ms run really well with this, and I don't think Sheikra, Montu, or Kumba ever have terribly long waits as a result. The issue, though, is Cheetah Hunt and Cobra's Curse are probably worse than Iron Gwazi overall in terms of operations, not necessarily because they're slow dispatches, but because they break down so much. Cheetah Hunt has some of the worst reliability I've ever seen on a roller coaster, and it's actually kind of impressive. When I said, this ride's always closed, and the operator says, this is the first time it's been down in 3 days, and I'm like, how is that impressive? It should not be, yeah, we went 3 days without shutting down. I understand that things happen and all, but I would not be bragging about that. And then Cobra's Curse, I don't understand. I'm pretty sure I have a Cobra's Curse because every time I get off the ride, it breaks. I guess lucky me and all, but then it'll open up like 30 minutes later, and then the cycle starts all over again, whether or not I'm on it. But the ride constantly has kind of bizarre issues. So yeah, I would say the operations are the one weak point of the park, besides the lack of depth for the non-roller coaster ride lineup. But overall, that's my thoughts on Busch Gardens Tampa. Is it the best theme park in America? I'm going to say, in 2022, no. It's very close. because I love roller coasters, it's right there with the best, and I would, because of Iron Gwazi primarily, take it above Islands of Adventure just a little bit. But the park that beats it for me is Kings Island in Ohio. And that one's a story for another time. But thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Comment down below your thoughts on Busch Gardens Tampa and any other parks you want to see me make reviews of. Subscribe for more content. I'll see you next time.